Hello my friends! I hope you are all doing well. I've been getting a lot of great questions from you in the comment section. Some of them are a bit tricky to explain in text, so I decided to make a little Q&A video where I'll answer some of your most interesting questions. We'll cover topics like countersteering, braking techniques, throttle and brake overlap and more. Let's dive right in. First one is from Cookie Monster. While trail braking, do I need to release full throttle? The same with regular braking, do I really need to release full throttle? Yes, in 99.9% of cases, unless you are intentionally doing a burnout or something like that, the throttle should be completely closed when using the front brake. This applies whether you are braking in a straight line, cornering or trail braking, it doesn't matter. If we try to apply the front brake and throttle simultaneously, we create two conflicting forces. The front tire will be using its traction to slow the bike down, while the rear tire under throttle will be trying to accelerate. Since the tire traction is finite and these forces are working against each other, there is a high chance that one of the wheels will skid. This is exactly what happens with some new riders. A common mistake is when they try to apply the front brake but forget to close the throttle. Here is how it usually ends up. To avoid this, always ensure the throttle is fully closed when using the front brake. Alright, next question is from Mr. AA. As a new rider, I was wondering what do you do with the throttle when you see a corner that is too sharp and try to lean more? Do I release the accelerator completely while leaning more? Good question. The answer depends on the specific situation and how you want to handle it. Generally, if you suddenly realize that a corner is sharper than expected, your goal is to slow the bike down, right? The higher your speed, the larger your turning radius will be. If the corner is too tight, you need to reduce the turning radius, which means slowing down. Slowing down requires braking, and as we discussed earlier, when using the brakes, the throttle must be closed. So, there is your answer. However, there may be situations where you don't want to slow down. For example, if the turn is just slightly sharper than you anticipated and all you need to do is to lean the bike a bit more, slowing down might not be necessary. In this case, you might want to use what's called maintenance throttle. What is maintenance throttle and why would we use it? If you look at the motorcycle tire's profile, it is round. It has a certain radius to it. As the bike leans further, it rides on smaller circumference of the tire. This means that for same speed, the wheel must complete more rotations. Since the wheel is rigidly connected to the engine through the transmission, the engine must also have higher RPM to maintain the same speed. If you don't open the throttle slightly to raise the RPM, the engine will slow the bike down due to engine braking. The small amount of throttle used to maintain a constant speed through a corner is called maintenance throttle. But it is only necessary if you want to keep your speed constant. If you want to slow down, the throttle should remain closed. Next question is from Night Kurmar Verma. Sorry if I butchered your name. And it is also about throttle. Why close it manually? I just let go of my throttle and grab it the way we started, making perfect use of time while letting go. I do use manual closing, but very little. There are a couple of key benefits to getting into the habit of manually closing the throttle. First, it reduces the risk of being caught off guard by a potential mechanical issue. For example, your throttle cables could become sticky over time, or some dirt might get trapped between the throttle grip and the handlebar. These issues can cause the throttle to close too slowly. If you are always relying on the throttle to automatically snap shut, one day it might not do so. Second, manually closing the throttle gives you much more control over engine braking. On smaller bikes like 125s, this might not matter as much, but on larger bikes with more powerful engines, engine braking can pack quite a punch. If you simply let go of the throttle every time, you'll experience a jerk from engine braking during each deceleration. You'll constantly smack helmets with your passenger, and in some situations, this sudden engine braking can actually be dangerous. For example, on a cold and wet day, if you suddenly snap the throttle shut somewhere on a roundabout, the abrupt engine braking could cause the tire to skid. That's why it is important to learn to carefully control the throttle and not just let it go every time you need to close it. Next question is from Beyond Pride MF. I've heard a couple of times now that people say to stand your bike up before braking mid-corner. Is that necessary? I mean, often you don't have the time or will go off the road if you stand up before braking. Great question! You've already partially answered it yourself, but let's break it down. Different situations call for different approaches. Generally, when you are cornering, you can't just straighten the bike, because you are right, it will go wide. However, if you are in the habit of using a late apex line, which we discussed in one of our previous videos, and if you leave a safety margin with your lean angle, meaning you are not leaning to the absolute limit, you have some options. One option is to quickly point the bike further into the turn. By doing this, you create more space in front of you, allowing you to straighten the bike and apply full braking force. This can be a good strategy for riders who don't yet feel comfortable braking while the bike is leaned over. Alternatively, you can simply brake mid-corner, if you know how, which is perhaps the most straightforward course of the action in such situations. One more question about braking, from Space40DC. Maybe a dumb question, but if I max squeeze the front brake, will the bike not make a front flip and catapult me forward, regardless of anti-lock? I guess that depends on the bike geometry and tires. That's not a dumb question at all, it is a perfectly normal one. And you're right, it depends on the specific bike. For a bike to perform a stoppie and throw you forward, it needs a combination of three factors: a lot of grip on the front tire, a high center of mass, and a short wheelbase. The longer and lower the bike, the harder it is to do a stoppie. On something really low and long, like a cruiser, I'm not sure it is even possible. Maybe it could be done with special tires on a prepared drag strip, but definitely not under normal conditions. Now, if we are talking about ABS-equipped bikes specifically, the answer depends on the type of ABS system. Simple ABS doesn't prevent a stoppie, however, more expensive bikes often come with advanced ABS systems, which include integrated accelerometers and brake line pressure sensors. These systems typically have an anti-stoppie function, and unless you disable it, you won't be able to nosedive no matter how hard you squeeze the brake. Alright, a question from Bistro Tistro. If I clutch in, then without releasing the clutch I shift down through 2-3 gears one by one, is it harmful? And is it okay to do? Yes, you can pull in the clutch and downshift multiple gears in one go. However, there is one very important thing to keep in mind. Make sure you are not over-revving the engine. Here is an example. Keep an eye on the tachometer. Notice that each time you downshift, your engine RPM jumps up by a certain amount. If you shift down 2-3 gears at once, all those RPM jumps, which would normally happen one by one, will happen all at once when you release the clutch. This could cause your RPM to shoot past the red line, potentially damaging the engine. Additionally, downshifting multiple gears at once results in much stronger engine braking when you release the clutch, so be prepared for that. It can catch you off guard if you are not expecting it. Aside from these considerations, sure, if you want to downshift several gears at once, like let's say if you are riding in third gear, then do some braking and then want to switch to first, it is totally fine. You can just pull in the clutch and shift down 2 gears in one go. Next question from Swashgarwal. Nowadays we have lever advantage systems for heavy clutch bikes like Enfields. Do you feel they have any major disadvantages? Just so everyone knows what we are talking about here, these are aftermarket devices designed to make the clutch pull easier. They are especially popular among dirt bike riders and stunt riders because they are a cheap and effective way to make the clutch lever super soft enough to pull with just one finger. On a road bike it's less critical since you can simply use more fingers to pull the clutch. Here's how it works. Inside this box is a lever mechanism. One cable connects to the clutch lever and the other connects to the clutch itself. And this here is a pivot point. Because you are pulling on a longer lever, the clutch pull becomes easier, but it also increases the travel distance. This means that when you install this device, you need to ensure there is enough travel in your clutch lever to fully engage and disengage the clutch. Since with this device you probably want to use your clutch with only one finger, you'll need to account for that as well and adjust it accordingly. So, the bottom line is that if you install it correctly and ensure everything is working as it should, you shouldn't have any issues. Next question is from Luanderson Ferreira. Is it bad to actually want your fingers to be trapped as a barrier to not overpull the clutch? For context, the comment is about the video about how to operate the clutch correctly and specifically about the biting point. When we release the clutch, there is a point where it starts to pull the bike forward. During slow riding, when we balance the bike by using the clutch, we can use a little trick. Instead of pulling the clutch all the way in while slowing down, we can pull it just past the biting point, just enough to disengage. This way, when we then need to release the clutch to catch the bike from falling, we don't have to release it too much. A small quick movement is enough. So, the question is it okay to use only one or two fingers to pull in the clutch, since the remaining fingers prevent the lever from going all the way in? The answer depends entirely on your particular motorcycle. On different bikes, the biting point can vary. If your bike's clutch bites further away from the handlebars, you can disengage it fully even with your fingers in the way. However, if the biting point is closer to the handlebars, let's say somewhere here, you'll need to use all four fingers to operate it properly. Next question from Echios. Without ABS, is it safe to use the front brake as much as you say? Does it work safely following the methods you mentioned? Yes! Everything I show in my videos is 100% applicable to any motorcycle, unless I specifically mention otherwise. That's also why I don't usually just tell you what to do, like, just use the front brake, bro, trust me. I always explain what's happening with the bike and why we approach things in a certain way. Take braking, for example. When we apply the brakes, there is always a weight transfer to the front wheel, no matter what type of bike you are riding or whether it has ABS or not. With more weight on the front wheel, it gains more traction, which means most of the stopping power inevitably comes from the front brake. If you want to stop quickly, you must use the front brake. There is physically no way to stop fast with just the rear brake. This doesn't change whether your bike has ABS or not. That's why it is so important to get really comfortable using the front brake. As for how safe it is, that depends entirely on how much time you dedicate to training. That's why I always include exercises in my videos. If you spend time practicing braking exercises in the parking lot, getting used to feedback from the brake and building the necessary muscle memory, you'll definitely be safer than the vast majority of riders on the road. Next is a very interesting question about countersteering. But before we dive in, a quick word from our sponsor, Ultramax Cell, the best thermal wear for motorcycle riders. Thanks to its special 3D polypropylene fabric, it enhances evaporative cooling in hot weather, keeping you more comfortable. In cold conditions, the 3D honeycomb structure traps more air around your body, helping to keep you warm. As Mr. Uncivil perfectly put it in one of the comments, Ultramax Cell keeps you warm enough to think fast, but also cool enough not to lose your composure. Sponsor him, Ultramaxcel. As always, I'll leave a link below the video so you can check it out for yourself. Now, back to the question from JitJab22. Slow steering can be called direct steering, right? As opposed to faster countersteering when you lean to turn. Again, we need a bit of context here. JitJab refers to the video where I explained how to turn the bike on super slow speeds and how to do full lock turns. Now, can what you see on the screen be called direct steering? This is a more complex question than it might seem at first. The issue lies in the lack of universally agreed upon terminology. There is no big book of motorcycling where terms like direct steering or countersteering are explicitly defined. As a result, different people imagine different things when they hear the term countersteering. For example, some people think countersteering on a motorcycle is similar to countersteering or opposite lock in a car, which happens when the vehicle is drifting. In that case, the bike leans one way, while the front wheel points in the other direction. However, when a motorcycle turns normally, without braking traction, the front wheel points in the same direction as the bike's lean angle. For instance, if the bike leans left, the front wheel also points left. Using this terminology, this, for example, is countersteering and this is direct steering. But there is also another definition of countersteering that I personally find more useful. Here is the logic. In general, steering is when a vehicle operator performs an action to make the vehicle go in a particular direction, right? Of course, the operator can be an idiot and steer the vehicle into a wall, but the point is that they must actively perform an action to steer. Steering is done on purpose. It doesn't just happen by itself. With cars, steering is very straightforward. A car has four wheels, it is stable, and if you don't do anything, it will simply continue moving forward. To steer, you turn the steering wheel, which pivots the front wheels and causes the car to go in the direction the front wheels are pointing. It is simple, you can just look at the front wheels and immediately tell whether the driver is steering left or right. With bikes it is more complicated. They don't have static balance and instead they rely on the front end for stability. When a bike leans, the front wheel automatically pivots to stabilize the bike without any input from the rider. This means that simply looking at the front wheel doesn't give us a clear indication of where the rider is steering. For example, at this moment I am trying to steer the bike to the left, but the front wheel points to the right. And after a moment, it points to the left. In this example, I am flipping the bike from left turn to a right turn, and the front wheel points left and then right. In this case, the front wheel is turned, but I'm not steering at all. The bike continues circling simply because the front wheel adjusts automatically. I am not actively steering the bike. It is all quite confusing, so instead of focusing on where the front wheel points, let's focus on the action performed by the rider. The simplest example is when the bike is going in a straight line. Let's say we want to turn left. To initiate the turn, we perform a specific action. We momentarily turn the handlebars to the right, which temporarily destabilizes the bike and causes it to lean to the left. Then we release the pressure on the handlebars and the front wheel automatically turns left. That's it. This brief action is what we call countersteering. It is called countersteering because we momentarily turn the handlebars in the opposite direction to change the lean angle. Honestly, we should just call it steering, but I don't make rules, so we are stuck with the term countersteering. The key takeaway is that countersteering is a short, deliberate action performed by the rider to change the bike's lean angle. Where the front wheel points during the process doesn't really matter. We briefly push the handlebar, the bike leans in the desired direction, and that's it. That's countersteering. And it doesn't just work in a straight line, it works when the bike is already leaning too. It's just harder to demonstrate on camera. For example, if the bike is already leaning, pushing the inside handlebar forward will make the bike lean more. Pushing the outside handlebar will cause the bike to stand up. With this mindset, let's return to the original question. When the bike is going around in circles like this, can we call it countersteering? The answer depends on the moment. If at any point the rider presses the handlebars to make the bike lean more or stand up, we can call that countersteering. However, if the rider isn't actively doing anything and is simply letting the bike balance itself, then it is not countersteering, it is not direct steering or any kind of steering at all. It's just bike maintaining its own balance. In this case, I wouldn't call it countersteering or direct steering, since the rider isn't performing any steering action. Great! We've covered quite a lot in this Q&A, from countersteering and throttle control to braking techniques, gear shifting and more. I hope these answers will help you feel a little more confident and in control on your bike. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with a friend who could use these tips, and subscribe to the channel for more motorcycle advice, techniques and exercises to improve your skills. For those looking to take their riding to the next level, check out the video description for links to our courses and in-depth riding guides. They'll help you to develop your skills and habits to ride safely and confidently, no matter the situation. As always, thank you for watching this video, ride safely and have an amazing day! Bye!